among my colleagues and fellow researchers from Tunisia and other parts of the world. I would also like to thank very much Dr. Limon Meliti, Professor Rabin Briki, and Professor Sahli Bazawi for their kind invitation, for their warm welcome today. And I hope this will be a nice opportunity to discuss future avenues of cooperation between the English department, the Faculty of Letters and Humanities of Kirwan, the doctoral school, and the laboratory approach to this course, and the English department and the Faculty of Letters of Science, which is not new. Professor Chiki has already started it with the English department, but we can still discuss further opportunities. I would also like to congratulate the English department on this nice newborn at the research level, the volume which gathers interesting chapters, and this is a new thing which, in order to compete, this is an example to follow, to publish the proceedings of the conference at its start. That was usually the practice of pure scientific fields, but it's high time in humanities we started this kind of practice. And also, last word, thanking you, or sorry, congratulating you on the approval of your new master degree, or maybe the master degree at the faculty. Okay, now today the title I suggested is The Tentacles of Hybridity, and what I'd like to deal with are some systemic functional perspectives on hybridity in text and context. This title was triggered by your revisiting hybridity, the theme suggested. Now, in fact, the term tentacles, or the metaphor of tentacles is not mine, in fact. It was used by the Miller and Bailey, the editors of a volume published in 2016 on hybridity in systemic functional linguistics, grammar, text, and discursive context. Now, where they say, but the reach of hybridity's tentacles is seemingly limitless, in their introduction to this edited volume. Now, in this volume, they spoke about the octopus hybridity, and I found this picture interesting with this octopus hybridity as an octopus, where its reach are limitless, so not only 8 tentacles, but more than that. And they spoke about hybridity as being a transdisciplinary buzzword. And as Professor Briki has started to talk today about the etymology of the word, starting with biology as a negative word, and then maybe when extending to other fields of knowledge, it's gaining some positive connotations. In linguistics, we do not speak about hybridity as something negative, but rather positive, because it is a source of richness. Now, in that introduction to this volume, they also talked about the high time for systemic functional linguistics to raise its voice on the subject, and the result was this edited volume where a group of scholars in systemic functional linguistics had tried to contribute to the debate on hybridity and how to approach it in grammar, in text, and context. Now, before things get a little bit complex, I start this presentation with some notions in systemic functional linguistics to make our debate on text and context more maybe simple. Then I'll deal with some methodological issues, what the theory has offered to deal with hybridity in text and context. And then I will talk about my contribution to this 2016 volume, and then how I'm revisiting hybridity in 2022. Now, just very few words about the theory, which started systemic functional linguistics, started in the 1960s with the founder Michael Heidegger. I will just take the concepts which are relevant to the debate we are raising today, because the theory is so complex I cannot cover it in a whole term, let alone a 30 minutes talk. So what is relevant to the debate today is the fact that it is functional. Functional meaning that people use language for a certain purpose, and Professor Tricky will totally agree with me on that thing, But this purpose or this function can only be understood in a specific context. So, if communication occurs between language users in social settings, this means that the meanings conveyed by language utterances may be interpreted only in relation to the social context in which the act of communication takes place. Now, in order to understand this relationship between text and context, let's see some working definitions. The definition of text, according to Halide and Hassan, dating back to 1976, and that was the working definition that is still used nowadays, it refers to any instance of language in any medium that makes sense to someone who knows the language. Okay, so here we noted the democratization of text. Text is not as it used to be something elaborate. Text can be spontaneous, it can be an order of a coffee at a coffee shop, or it can be a plenary speech. So any instance of language. Now, a working definition of the context, on the other hand, it is that extra-linguistic environment in which language operates as spoken or written discourse. Okay, so the environment, but it is still general as a definition. Now, what is relevant here is that the text and the context are mutually predictive. What this means is that the text is dependent on the context, and the context adds meaning or adds interpretation to the text, which means that different types of text are produced in different types of contexts, and which are called in the theory as functional varieties. The text will differ according to the context in which it is produced. Now, for its importance, the notion of context has been further elaborated on in SFL. So we have two layers of context: the context of culture and the context of situation. The context of culture is defined as the total cultural background, and it is studied in SFL as the genre, and it includes two main components: the communicative purpose and the rhetorical structure of the text, or the organization of the text into moods. And then the context of situation is the closed environment of the text, subdivided itself into three vectors: field, that is the subject matter, what discourse is about; tenor, relationship between the interruptants, the text producer and the text receiver; and the mode, including medium and channel, whether it's oral, okay, or whether it's visual or written. Okay. Now, you can see in the picture here the two strata of context being above the textual level. Okay? So we have the stratum of genre, which is the outer stratum, and then the stratum of register, and they are both above the text. What this means is that being at the higher stratum, the two vectors or the two layers of context will affect the text. Now, these contextual variables or factors will leave traces in the text. So, as you can see in this figure from 2013, the context would activate meanings, and meanings would themselves activate lexicogrammatical choices. When we speak about lexicogrammatical choices, we mean just both lexis and grammatical structure. And this is what Hassan calls the activation construal dialectic. It means that it would go from the higher point of context to the text, its activation. But if we have the text at hand, we talk about construal. It means that from the lexicogrammatical choices, we construe meanings, and from meanings, we construe the context. Now, what is the implication of this at the level of methodology? So, as analysts, our first point or our encounter is the text. We start developing intuitions to identify and describe the stages, each with their own function. Then, the second step is the analysis of vocabulary or lexis and the analysis of grammatical patterns. Now, doing this, we develop hypotheses about the genre, first about the meanings, and then we construe the genre or the register and the genre of the text. And of course, as it is quantitative, probabilistic approach, the more text we examine, the better it is, and this has made of SFL a course-based methodology. Now, just to illustrate all this, I think I've got some theory. Let's see this example of a text. I'm going to read the text and try to have your guesses about its genre. My overall judgment on this paper is positive. It is a solid example of applied conversational analysis that elucidates the local organization of an important phenomenon in medical interruptions. The analysis presented in the paper takes off from the classic discussion of closing conversations in Chekhov and Sachs, 1973. The text is written in rather a formal, dry style. I would therefore recommend to shorten the introductory parts a bit. Consider to start with an example to open up the reader's interest in the issues to be dealt with. Any guesses about the text, where this text is extracted from? Yes, it is an academic genre.
Medical.
Review, yes, it's a review, okay? It's a review report, a PhD or article, so it's a peer review report. Now, of course, so here we have used our intuitions, our knowledge of the genre to make guesses about the text. In fact, the text is from a peer review report, and we can here identify the move structure, so we can see that the peer review report is divided into 4 moves, which I have here colored in different colors. So, move 1 is summarizing judgment regarding the suitability for publication. My overall judgment on this paper is positive. And then outlining the article, describing what the article talks about, which you can see read here. Then the review report contains some points of criticism, positive and negative. So on the one hand, we have it's a solid example of applied conversation analysis, and then on the other hand, we have the text is written rather a dry way. And then the 4th move, or the 4th part in the peer review report, is to recommend, to suggest recommendations, suggestions for changes for revisions. Okay? So here we identify the structure, but also the nexus helps us. Something like judgment, something like positive, solid, dry, recommend, consider, the use of the imperative. So here the analysis of the structure and of nexus helps us identify the genre of the text or construe the genre of the text. Now, moving a step further, so the text context, now where hybridity can be seen, it's in fact everywhere, and this is not only according to SFL linguists, but according to all discourse analysts. An example here is Bahatia, 2014. Although we often identify and conceptualize genres in pure forms, in the real world, they are often seen in hybrid, mixed, and embedded forms. And I guess any scholar and all colleagues here today will agree that genres are hybrid. Okay? The default condition for genres is to be hybrid because we fulfill different functions at the same time. Okay? Now, the hypothesis here, or the SFL construct, theoretical construct, is that the fact that genres are hybrid results in hybrid texts. And we can see hybridity in text through a hybrid lexicography. Okay? So we analyze lexicography to construe hybridity in the text, and then later to construe the hybridity of the genre. Okay? So we can go either top-down or bottom-up. Okay? Now, and this idea resulted in this volume which I talked about earlier, and it started with some assumptions such as hybridity being a phenomenon of multifaceted complexity, hence the metaphor of the octopus, that they talk about the typical hybrid nature of text and discourse, and that cultural context or situational context are potentially hybrid. Okay? And then the volume, there are 15 chapters in which scholars have tried to explore how hybridity is manifested in different discourse types in a wide range of genres and registers. Okay? My contribution was a chapter on the peer review report in which I studied the interpersonal uses of language, the mood and modality. Now, my hypothesis here was that we have one genre, which is the peer review report, but because the peer review report is expressed in different contexts, here we take the discipline of research as a context, we can have a hybrid text where the disciplinary culture interacts with the genre. So for this I took 30 peer review reports which represent one genre, the report, and then they are equally divided between two academic disciplines, linguistics and mathematics, which constitute, according to my hypothesis, two disciplinary genres or cultures. And my expectation was that they would put or they would leave different traces in the text. So the text would be hybrid, where we have the introduction of different contextual factors. Now, I started, as I said, 30 peer review reports. My approach was bottom-up, because as an analyst, I take the text, my access point to the text is lexis and grammar. And then I quantified the choices of lexicogrammatical manifestations in the text, and from the quantification I tried to construe meanings and then context. And then, of course, for the sake of validity, I used some statistical tests, like frequency distributions and the chi-square for significance. Now, some of the results in this study were that the linguistic reviews tended to be more critical. So this was found in the literature with Gianni in her study of reviews, saying that there is marked preference for negative evaluation in linguistics. They insist on negative points, for example, the use of clause complex expressing elaboration through restatement. For example, here, the example I took from a report, the formatting is not reader friendly, okay, it's clear. So why saying, in fact, it is confusing? Okay, so there is some insistence on the negative point. On the other hand, the criticism in the mathematics report was mitigated by modality, which makes it less faith-threatening. For example, I think the re-exponent, in the e-exponent, the sign is wrong. Okay, so mitigated by the metaphor of modality, I think. Now, another finding or another result in this study was that there was a higher percentage of recommendation instances in mathematics than in linguistics, which means that there were more suggestions for changes to brought to the paper. For example, here, before the statement of theorem X indicate the fact that the family Qx is a partition of V and X. On the other hand, in linguistics, the recommendations were a little bit vague. I wonder if more could be said about this. Okay, so what we can construe about the disciplinary culture here is that in mathematics, they tend to be more cooperative in the review process. Now, another result is that modality was more frequent in linguistics than in mathematics. The requests for changes were made indirect. Like, for example, here, I wonder if the paper could be better integrated, which means that changes are less urgent than in mathematics. For example, here, I would like the authors to revise the manuscript according to the comments I have given where possible. What this means, I mean, this low modality and this conditional use mean that the revision in the linguistics report, the linguistics article are less urgent, and this, of course, can be explained by the nature of the discipline itself. It's not right or wrong, it's interpretative, so you could either abide by the reviewer's comments or just insist on your point of view. So my conclusion or my major findings in that study was that the peer review report is a hybrid text, and it is the result of a hybrid contextual factors. What I concluded in that study was some theoretical constructs like the context of culture, context of situation, which were useful to study hybridity in text and context. Now, SFR also offers a methodological toolkit for the investigation of generic properties and the activation of meaning and structure of text with this activation construal dialectic. I also came up to the conclusion that the SFR model can be applied to any genre, be it academic, literary, political, historical, whatever text genre. It offers a methodological toolkit. And then in 2022, and as a response to the call Mimoun sent me, in fact, this is something I'm practicing more than researching on. So what I'm going to say today is more raising questions than answering them. This is another genre which I consider the MA dissertation, okay, which is another academic genre. where the purpose is to assess students' ability to apply theories and methods learned in their courses, to display initiative and to effectively review the literature, conduct research, analyze results, and present findings. This is the purpose of an MA. This is what we require our students at the MA studies, and here I mean the research MA studies to do. This is the purpose is clear, but the structure is not. Why isn't it clear? Because it is dependent on the discipline. Now, I consider the MA dissertation as a hybrid genre. First, because we have the impact of the discipline. Different disciplines, let alone scientific disciplines, but even in English departments, the literature versus culture versus linguistics, we have different requirements. We ask our students to come up with different genres or different text types, so which makes it hybrid. In addition to that, it's not only about disciplines, but also about sub-disciplines. I take the example of linguistics. Now, we talk about the discipline of linguistics, but for example, the requirement in discourse analysis is not the same in sociolinguistics, it's not the same in psycholinguistics, so different sub-disciplines would have different requirements. Another factor of hybridity is the fact that the boundaries between the disciplines are increasingly being blurred. Okay? Now, in addition to disciplinary work, we have interdisciplinary work, and with interdisciplinary work, you have to abide by the conventions of one discipline and the other, and this would make our students sometimes at a loss. What to follow, what to abide by. In addition to that, we have another variable, the fact that disciplines are also context dependent in different parts of the world. Now, the communities are different, and even if you are in the same discipline, for example, I take the community of STACS, the MA in STACS is different from the MA at ISLT. Okay? And I have noticed that from experience in evaluating MA and PhD dissertations. In addition to that, we have the individual variations, supervisors, evaluators having different preferences. I have some of my students, just for anecdote, my supervisor saying, I would like to do that because I know Professor Tricky likes that. Okay, so they try to abide not only by communities, but also by individual preferences. Now, what makes things worse is that the official text, although it provides general regulations like the information about enrollment, supervision, originality of the topic, it leaves some vagueness. It is vague. I mean, a student consulting the official text would not find anything. Now, why I'm motivated to work on this, I started working on it, so I'm not going to present any findings, just some exploratory work. Now, I'm exploring that because of the importance of genre in L2 writing, because my motivation is to raise genre awareness of students to genre conventions and genre hybridity, not only to conventions, but also to hybridity, in order to have them create research space, in order to have them use rhetorical and linguistic strategies connected to disciplinary knowledge-making practices. In work to socialize students with their discourse communities. Okay, like we socialize children in discourse, in speech communities, we try to socialize students in discourse communities, and in word, the practical side, to make them more proficient academic writers. I'm about to finish. Now, in this study, I started with the practical part rather than with the theoretical part. And this is an example in my MA academic course for first-year master and second-year master. So I think that first step is to introduce students to genre. And here in my first year course, I make an introduction to genre theory, genre analysis, characteristics of different academic genres, like research articles, textbook pieces, in order to familiarize students with the genre. And then in the second year, I hope you can see, it's not very clear because I copied it from my PDF, the objective of the course would be to raise students to the MA dissertation and to make them aware of disciplinary conventions, and the third objective is to help them choose the appropriate rhetorical strategies and stylistic choices. Okay? And this is a sample of the first lesson in my academic writing course for second-year master. What you can see in red here is the generic structure of the dissertation, cause-based investigation. So in this activity, I asked my students to go to the library and to collect each one MA dissertation, and we use that as a corpus. So I asked them to identify the sections, to identify the introduction, the literature review, the methodology, and then give the page numbers of each section.